there, my name is Kira, and today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet this adorable little kangaroo, one of my new favorite patterns. It's absolutely adorable and it works up really quickly. If you're a beginner, check out the videos I have linked down below with tutorials for a magic ring and then some of the other basic stitches that I'll be using in today's pattern. Let's go ahead and get started. For supplies, you'll need a pair of scissors, a 5mm crochet hook, a stitch marker and an embroidery needle, 20mm safety eyes, and some polyfill stuffing. For yarn today, I'll be using Premier Parfait Chunky in the color Teddy Bear and a scrap piece of white plush yarn. And then you'll also need a scrap piece of black medium weight yarn. So the first thing we're gonna do is make the arms. So I just have my body colored yarn here, and I'm gonna start by making 6 single crochet and a magic ring. If you don't know how to make a magic ring, as I mentioned in the beginning, I will link a more in-depth tutorial for this down below. For the next round, I'm gonna make 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch and repeat that 3 times to go all the way around. So I'm gonna start with 1 single crochet, and then an increase stitch, and an increase stitch is just 2 single crochet into the same stitch. And then I'm gonna repeat that 2 more times. For the next 4 rounds, I'm gonna do 4 rounds of 9 single crochet around. And if you haven't already, I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker, and just for reference, I like to keep my stitch marker in the last stitch of the round rather than the first stitch of the round. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 4 slip stitches. And then 5 half double crochet. So to make a half double crochet, I'm going to yarn over my hook and then insert it into my next stitch. Pull up a loop, so I now have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. So I'm gonna do 5 of those. That was 1. I'm gonna go ahead and just flip this right side out. And then for the next round, it's gonna be the exact same thing we just did again. So I'm gonna start with another 4 slip stitches. And then finish off the round with 5 half double crochet. For the next 2 rounds, I'm just going to be doing 2 rounds of 9 single crochet around. And just a tip, when you're crocheting with your slip stitches, instead of going under the last slip stitch you did, it might be easier to just kind of go under both. Like you'll see your hook will just kind of fit in that spot. Go under both the rows of slip stitches that we did. So I'm just going to do 2 rounds of 9 single crochet around. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add a little stuffing in here. And then as you can see, we've made a little bit of a curve to the arm, and we're gonna close this across the top. But before you close it, you wanna make sure that your yarn is kind of centered at the back of this curve so that when we close it, the arm curves sideways like this. So I'm going to remove one of my single crochet. You might have to add or remove a couple of single crochet to also get your yarn into the right spot. But once your yarn kind of lines up with the back of this curve here, the opposite side, then we can go ahead and close the arm. And to close the arm, I'm just going to fold these two ends together here and then make 4 single crochet through both sides. Two, 3, and 4. And then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn, and you don't need to worry about leaving a tail. And then once you have one arm all finished, you want to go ahead and repeat those steps again to make a second arm. And then we can go ahead and just set these aside for now, and we'll come back to them once we get started on the body. Next, we're going to make the feet. So you just want to start by making 8 single crochet into a magic ring. And then for the next round, we're just going to do 8 increases to go all the way around. So 8 increase stitches. And then for the next round, we're just going to make 16 single crochet around. For the next round, I'm going to make 2 single crochet and a decrease stitch 4 times to go all the way around. So 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch, and then I'm going to do that 3 more times. For the next round, I'm just going to make 12 single crochet around. For the next round, I'm going to make 2 single crochet and a decrease stitch, and then repeat that 3 times to go all the way around. So I'm going to do 1 and 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch, and then I'm going to do that 2 more times. For the next round, I'm going to do 1 single crochet and then a decrease stitch and repeat that 3 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then a decrease stitch, and then I'm going to do that 2 more times. And then I'm going to go ahead and tuck just a little bit of stuffing into the leg. And then we're going to go ahead and close off the foot. So to do that, I'm just going to close these 2 ends together here and make 3 single crochet through both sides. One, 2, and 3. And then you can go ahead and tie off the yarn, but you do want to leave a little bit of a tail for sewing. Once you have one of your feet all finished, you want to go ahead and repeat those steps again to make a second foot. I'm just going to go ahead and set these aside for now, and we will come back to them once we get started on the body. And for the hip, the first thing you want to do is make a slip knot on your hook and chain 5. And then starting in this second stitch from my hook, so you can see I have this 1 and 2. So starting in this stitch here, I'm going to make 3 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 3 single crochet in 1. So 3 single crochet all into this one stitch. So there's 1, and then again into that same stitch, there's 2, and one more time into the same stitch, there's 3. And then I'm going to turn my chain over, so now I'm looking at the other side of my chain, and I'm going to make 3 single crochet into the other side of these chain stitches. So there's 1, 2, and 3, and then this stitch right here is the chain stitch that we skipped at the beginning, and into that stitch I'm going to make another 3 single crochet in 1. So 3 single crochet all into that very first chain stitch that we skipped at the beginning, just like that. And then into this next stitch here, this was the first single crochet that we made on our chain. I'm just going to go and make a slip stitch in this stitch to kind of secure this around. So now we have kind of a base foundation chain that gives us a little bit of an oval shape. And I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker into this last stitch that we just made. And then for the next round, I'm just going to make 1 single crochet and an increase stitch 6 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch, and then I'm going to do that 5 more times. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 2 single crochet, and then I'm going to make 6 increase stitches, and you want to make sure that these increase stitches are kind of centered on top of your chain that we made. So like they should be going across the top of this oval shape. So I'm going to do my 6 increases. And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 10 more single crochet. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 18 single crochet. And then I'm going to finish off the round with 6 slip stitches. And then for the last round, we're just going to do 24 single crochet a round. And then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn. You don't need to worry about leaving a tail or anything like that. These will be crocheted into the body. And then just for reference real quick, the part of the hip where your tail is right here, this is going to be the bottom of the hip, which you'll need to know that later on. So just keep that in mind. This right here where your tail is the bottom of the hip. And once you have one hip done, you want to go ahead and repeat those steps again to make a second hip. And then we can go ahead and just set these aside, and we will come back to them once we get started working on the body. Okay, next we're going to make the tail for the kangaroo. And when you're making the tail, you do want to leave a little bit of a long tail on your magic ring, because we're going to end up using this later to help give the tail some shape. And then I'm going to go ahead and just start by making 6 single crochet into a magic ring. For the next 3 rounds, I'm going to do 3 rounds of 6 single crochet around. And then for the next round, I'm going to do 2 single crochet and an increase stitch and repeat that 2 times to go all the way around. So 1 and 2 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm just going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to do 3 rounds of 8 single crochet around. For the next round, I'm going to do 3 single crochet and then an increase stitch and repeat that 2 times to go all the way around. So 1, 2, and 3 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to do 2 rounds of 10 single crochet around. For the next round, I'm going to do 4 single crochet and then an increase stitch and repeat that 2 times to go all the way around. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that one more time. And then I'm just going to do 1 round of 12 single crochet around to finish off the tail. And then I'm going to go ahead and flip this to be right side out. So if you haven't done that already, I'm just going to take my hook and push it down to the very bottom of the tail and just wrap the tail from my magic ring around it and pull that to the inside. And then that will kind of help give me some leverage to pull this to be right side out, maybe. We are also going to use the tail from our magic ring to help curl this tail. So feel free to keep that on the outside for now. So I just have my tail facing the right way, and I have my tail from my magic ring on the outside, and I'm going to keep that there for now, and we'll come back to that later. Feel free to add a little bit of stuffing into the tail if you'd like. And then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn, but you do want to leave a little bit of a tail for sewing. And then I'm going to go ahead and just set this aside until we get started working on the body, and then we will come back to it. Let's make the kangaroo's pouch. So to do that, I'm going to start by making a slip knot on my hook. And I'm going to chain 10. So 1, and then I'm going to go ahead and starting in this second stitch from my hook, so I'm going to skip this first chain and go into that second stitch, just like that. I'm going to make 9 single crochet. And then at the end of this row, I'm going to chain 2 and turn. And then again, starting in that second stitch from my hook, I'm going to make 10 single crochet across. And then after my 10 single crochet, I'm going to chain 2 again on this side and turn my work. And then starting in that second stitch from my hook, I'm going to make 11 single crochet across. Okay, and now I'm going to make the next row, I'm going to do 5 times. So I'm going to do 5 rows of chain 1, turn, and then 11 single crochet. And again, we're just still starting in that second stitch from my hook, so I'm going to make 11 single crochet. Okay, so we actually already did 1 row of 11 single crochet, so I'm going to do this for the next 4 rows, so 5 rows total. Okay, and then once you have your 5 total rows of 11 single crochet done, I'm going to go ahead and just tie off this yarn. And you don't need to worry about leaving much of a tail. And then I'm going to set this aside for just a second, but we'll come back to it in just a second here. The last thing we're going to do before we get started on the body and the head is make the ears. So I'm just going to start by making a slip knot on my hook. And for this slip knot, you do want to leave a pretty good sized tail on the end of your slip knot, and we'll use this later to help keep the ears standing up. So you can see I just have a little tail on my slip knot. And these are very similar to how we did the hips. So I'm going to chain 6. And then starting in that second stitch from my hook, so skipping 1, and into that second stitch, I'm going to make 4 single crochet. And then into this next stitch, I'm going to make 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. So 1, 2, and then again into that same stitch, there's 3. And then I'm going to kind of turn my chain over and repeat the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to make 4 single crochet. And then into this chain stitch that we initially skipped at the beginning, I'm going to make another 3 single crochet in 1. And then just into that first single crochet that we made, I'm going to make a slip stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker in that stitch. And for the next round, I'm going to do 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch and repeat that 7 times to go around. So 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that 6 more times. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 5 single crochet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to make 4 increase stitches. And again, these increases should be at the top of your oval shape. Like, you don't want them to be over here on the side. They should be up here on the top of your oval. And if they're not, feel free to make adjustments as needed to make sure that they are in the right spot. So I'm just going to do 4 increases. And then I'm going to make 7 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 1 decrease stitch. And in this next stitch, I'm going to do 3 single crochet in 1. So again, just 3 single crochet into the same stitch. And then I'm just going to finish off this round with another decrease stitch. And then I'm just going to go ahead and make 25 single crochet a round. And then lastly, this here is the top of the ear, and I'm just going to make probably about 8 slip stitches down the side of the ear just to get my yarn tail to the bottom of the ear, so it's easier to hide it when we're crocheting the ears into the body. So again, I'm just going to make about 8 slip stitches to move this tail down. And then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn. And then here is one of my ears all finished. And once you have one ear done, you want to go ahead and repeat those steps again to make a second ear. And then again, I'm just going to go ahead and set these aside for now, and we'll come back to them once we get started working on the head. So to get started on the body, I'm just going to start by making 8 single crochet into a magic ring. And then for the next round, I'm going to do 8 increase stitches. And then for the next round, I'm going to do 1 single crochet and an increase stitch and repeat that 8 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm just going to repeat that 7 more times. And then for the next round, I'm going to do 3 single crochet and an increase stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1, 2, 3 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that 5 more times. And then in this next round, we're going to be crocheting the hips into the body. So I'm just going to start by making 4 single crochet. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm going to grab one of my hips. And if you remember, I said the spot here where your tail was on the hip is the bottom of the hip. So these next 6 stitches are what I'm going to be crocheting through onto the body to connect this to the body. So just, you can see I have my hip, and I'm going to flip that over so I'm looking at this tail that's on the inside from my slip knot. And then on my body, I have my pretty side facing up. So the tail from my magic ring is on the bottom. And I'm going to take them just like this and line them up with each other. And then for the next 6 stitches, I'm going to go through a stitch on the body and on the hip. And like I said, it's really important to make sure that on the hip you're going through those 6 stitches that are centered at the bottom of the hip. So I'm going to go through a stitch on my body, the next stitch on my body, and the first stitch on my hip. And then just make a single crochet through both of those pieces. And then I'm going to do 5 more of those. So this is 2. And I'm just going through a stitch from the hip and a stitch from the body. There's 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I'm going to make 9 single crochet. And then we're going to attach the other hip the same way. So I have my other hip, and again, the tail on my hip right here is the bottom. This is the bottom of the hip. So I'm going to find these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches that are centered at the bottom and line them up with my body the exact same way as we did before. So the sides with the tails sticking out are going to be touching each other. And then just like before, I'm going to go through the next 6 stitches on both the body and the hip to connect them. And then I'm just going to finish off the round by making 5 more single crochet. Alrighty, and then after that round, you should have something that looks like this. So I have the bottom of my body here, and then I have both my hips on the sides of the body. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn here. You do not want to tie it off, so leave your yarn attached here to the back of this is going to be the back of the body, but just cut the end of it, and we're going to come back and work over here in a little bit. But first we're going to focus on the front of our body here. So I'm just going to flip this over and then make a slip knot on my hook with that same color brown yarn. And just when you make your slip knot, you want to make sure to leave a super long tail on your slip knot, and we'll use this later. Just make sure to leave a really long tail on your slip knot. And what I'm going to do is take my pouch piece that we made here, and I'm going to line this up down here with these 9 stitches that are here between our 2 hips. And again, this is in the front of the body. So the back of the body is where we just cut off that yarn where your stitch marker still is. So in the front of the body, kind of looking at the bottom here, I'm going to line up the bottom of my pouch, which is this smaller part. This is where we did our chain at the bottom, with these 9 stitches here across between these 2 hips. And I'm going to take my slip knot and start over here. This is the right hip when you're looking at it. So I'm just going to go into that first stitch on my pouch and that first stitch here on my body that's available. And I'm going to make 9 single crochet through both of these pieces. Okay, and then we're going to kind of work in rows up the front of the body here to make a belly. And this is totally a trust the process type of pattern, so I promise, just trust me, we're going to build this up to make a belly, and then we'll have our pouch that comes up, and then we will kind of attach everything together. So what I'm going to do next is chain 1 and turn, and then I'm just going to make another 9 single crochet across, starting in that second stitch from my hook. And then I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and turn. And in this next row, I'm going to start by making 3 single crochet. Again, just starting in that second stitch from my hook. So 1, 2, and 3 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 3 increase stitches in the next 3 stitches. And then I'm just going to finish off this row with 3 more single crochet. And then again, I'm just going to chain 1 and turn. And I'm going to make 12 single crochet across. Again, just starting in that second stitch from my hook. And then I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and in this next row I'm going to do 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch 3 times. So starting in that second stitch from my hook, I'm going to make 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch. And then I'm going to do that 2 more times. And then at the end of the row here, I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and I'm going to make 9 more single crochet across the top here. And then again, chain 1 and turn. And then the last row for this belly part is going to be 1 single crochet and a decrease stitch 3 times. So I'm going to do 1 single crochet and then a decrease stitch. And then I'm just going to repeat that 2 more times. So again, you should have something that looks like this now, where you have your body, your 2 hips, your belly here, and then the pouch is also attached on there. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach these 2 pieces and the hips all together, the front part of the hips, so that this kind of sits up and is nice and attached onto those hips. Kind of like that, except it'll look a whole lot better. So in order to do that, we need to crochet all 3 of these pieces together. And I want to do that from the inside of the body so that it's nice and hidden. So I'm going to take my 2 layers here and just using this yarn that we already have working on the belly here, I'm going to go down to my hip and I'm going to count 6 stitches upwards from the bottom where it's attached to the body. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This right here is my 6 stitches. I'm just going to mark this with my embroidery needle, but you can totally put a stitch marker there if you want. And I'm going to kind of flip this so that the hip is facing me. And then I'm going to take both my layers here, so I have the pouch and the belly. And I want to kind of fold everything inward together. So I'm looking at these 3 layers all nice and lined up with the hip. And again, I'm working from the inside of the body. So here's like the tail for my magic ring on the body. We're working on from the inside of the body. So I'm going to kind of line up these 3 layers. And what I want to do is make 6 single crochet through all 3 of these layers to connect them. I want to start up here at the top of where I marked that stitch on my hip, so that'll be 1. And then I'm going to work my way down back to the body over here. Hope this makes sense. I know this is definitely not the normal way to do things, but I tried really hard to make this a no-sew pattern, or a low-sew pattern. So to crochet these together, I'm going to take my hook and kind of bend it around so that I'm working over here, coming from this direction. And I'm going to go into this first stitch that I currently have marked on my hip. Just like that. And then I'm also going to go through the very top stitch of my pouch and the top stitch of the belly that I can see just on the side there. So I hope you can see that. I have my crochet hook going through all 3 of those layers, and I'm just going to make 1 single crochet. So there's 1, and then I'm going to do this all the way down, and you just want to make sure you're grabbing a stitch from each of these 3 pieces each time. 2. 3. 4. 5. And 6. And then once you've done all 6 stitches, you can go ahead and tie off this yarn. And you don't need to worry about leaving a tail or anything, because this is just going to be nice and hidden in the body. And then when I flip this back to the outside, you can see what that did here. So it kind of connected the hip with my pouch and my belly. And we're gonna do this same thing on the other side as well. So once it's connected, it'll look something like that. And then you'll have the little pouch in here. To connect this other side, we're gonna do it the exact same way, except we're gonna be working from the bottom of the body upwards towards the top of the hip and the top of the pouch and the belly. And this is why I asked you to leave a super long tail on your slip knot, which I forgot to do. Done it correctly, you would have a super long tail here, and then you can just use this tail here to make your stitches going up to connect these 3 pieces. Again, I'm folding these 3 pieces together to match up from the inside of the body. We're looking at the inside of the body, so everything's kind of inside out right now. And again, I'm gonna find this first available stitch on my hip and then go through the next 2 pieces as well, just right on the edge there. And then you would take your tail from your slip knot, which I'm gonna pretend that this is the tail for my slip knot. So grab that on your hook, pull it through, and then make a slip stitch. So that counts as 1 stitch. And then we're just gonna do 5 more, going up the hip and connecting all 3 of these pieces. So there's 2, and these are single crochet. There's 3. Four. 5. And then 1 more. Is 6, okay? And then you can go ahead and just tie off that yarn as well. And I know this probably is not the most beginner-friendly technique, so if this is something you're having trouble with, you're welcome to just sew all those 3 pieces together. So now when I turn this back right side out, you can see we have our 2 hips, our pouch, and then our belly is also up in here. So we're gonna go back to working on the back of the body here. All right, and then for the back of the body, we're gonna kind of pick up where we left off before. So you can go back where your stitch marker's at, where we cut the yarn before. And the first thing I'm gonna do is make 4 single crochet. Now at some point you will have to reattach your yarn since we cut it off. So just do that whenever you need to, depending on how long of a tail you left. I'm gonna go ahead and do it now just to get it. So I'm just making 4 single crochet, and then I'm gonna make a slip stitch into my hip. So you can see this stitch here was used to attach the hip to the bottom of the body. So I'm gonna start in this next one up here, in the next available stitch on the hip. Oops. I'm gonna go into there and then just make a slip stitch. And I'm gonna turn. So that slip stitch is gonna act the same as if we did like a chain 1 and turn. And then you can go ahead and remove your stitch marker. And then we're gonna repeat this next row 11 times. So I am gonna skip 1 and go into that next stitch. And again, that was our slip stitch that we just made. So that's acting as my chain 1 before I turn. And starting in that second stitch for my hook, I'm gonna make 9 single crochet. And then just like we did on the other side, I'm gonna go into the next available stitch on my hip and make a slip stitch and then turn. So that was one row, and we want to do the 11 rows total just like that. So I'll do another one with you here. Starting in that second stitch from my hook, I'm going to do 9 single crochet. And then finish off the row with a slip stitch into the next stitch on my hip. So that was 2, and then I'm going to turn, and again I'm just going to repeat this, doing my 9 single crochet, slip stitch into the hip, turn, and then repeat it again. And just make sure you're slip stitching into the hip each round before you turn. So that was 2 rows, and I'm going to do that 11 rows total, so I have 9 more to go. And I'm going to go ahead and do these off camera since it's just the same thing that we've been doing. But I'll be right back once I have that finished to show you what to do next. So I just finished my 11 rows of 9 single crochet, and you should have something that looks like this. So that kind of built up the back of the body for us. And after your 11 rows, it should be so that when you made your last slip stitch into the hip and turned, now you're ready to go back and crochet this direction to go around, because now we're gonna start crocheting around this entire body that we've built up here. And you'll also know that you did it correctly if you have 6 stitches left on each hip that are left open that you haven't worked into yet. So what I'm gonna do is place my stitch marker, and like I said before, I like my stitch marker to be in the last stitch of the round. And I know that this stitch here, right next to where my crochet hook is right now, this is going to be the last stitch of the round, so I'm just going to mark that just so it's easier for me to keep track when I'm doing this next round. And for this next round, what I'm going to do, so like I said before, we did our slip stitch and we turned. So just for this next round only, I'm going to skip that first stitch, since that was our slip stitch into the hip, and go into that second stitch from my hook, and I'm going to make another 9 single crochet. Jumping over to my hip here, we're going to do 2 single crochet and a decrease stitch, and then another 2 single crochet 3 times. So we're going to do that on this hip, on the belly, and then on my other hip as well. So I'll show you here. So we're going to jump over to the hip. So in that next available stitch on my hip, I'm going to make 2 single crochet, and then a decrease stitch, and then another 2 single crochet, and then we're going to jump over onto the belly and repeat that again. So make sure you're not working on the pouch, because that's going to need to stay on the outside. We're going to work on this belly here. So I'm going to go into that first available stitch on the belly and make 2 single crochet, and then a decrease stitch, and then 2 more single crochet, and then we're going to do it one more time on the hip. So I'm going to jump over to that next available stitch on my hip, and I'm going to make 2 single crochet. Just make sure these stitches are a little bit tight so that there's no like big gaps in between there. And then I'm going to make my decrease stitch, and then just finish off this round with 2 more single crochet. And then the next 4 rounds are just going to be 4 rounds of 24 single crochet a round. So I'm going to go ahead and do these 4 rounds off camera. But again, you're going to do 4 rounds of 24 single crochet around, and then I'll be back to show you what to do next. So I just finished my 4 rounds of 24 single crochet around, and you can kind of see the body starting to form a little bit more here. I'm going to go ahead and tuck some stuffing into the bottom part of the body. And when you're stuffing the body, you just really want to make sure to fill out all of those little spaces and shapes that we made. So make sure to fill out the hips really good, and the belly and the back, just to make sure everything's nice and round. It should look pretty thick here with these hips. And then for the next round, we're going to be crocheting the arms into the body. So I'm going to go ahead and make some extra single crochet just to shift my stitch marker over to the back center of the body here. So it looks like I need to make about 5 extra single crochet to move my stitch marker over, but make as many as you need to. You just want to make sure that before you start this next round, your stitch marker is nice and centered at the back of the body, so that when we place the arms, they are lined up in the correct place. So I just shifted all that over, and then for this next round, first we're just going to start by making 5 single crochet. And then I'm going to grab my first arm and you want to make sure that this is lined up with the body so that the little bend is facing forward, like you want that arm to face forward on the body. To attach this, I'm just going to line up those 4 stitches on the top of the arm with the next 4 stitches on my body, and then make 4 single crochet through both of these pieces. And then I'm going to make 5 single crochet across the front of the body here. And then grab my other arm, and I'm going to attach it the exact same way. So again, you want to make sure that the bend in the arm is facing the front of the body where your pouch is. And then I'm just going to line up those next 4 stitches on my arm with the next 4 stitches on my body, and then make 4 single crochet through both pieces. And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. And then for the rest of the pattern, it is important to keep that stitch marker centered at the back of the body. So just make shift stitches, make some extra stitches whenever you need to keep your stitch marker nice and centered in the right spot. For this next round, I'm going to go ahead and make 12 decrease stitches to go all the way around. And then real quick before we get started working on the head, I'm just going to take a little more stuffing and tuck that into the body, and then we're also going to attach the feet and the tail just so that we get all of that out of the way. And then before we get started on the head, I'm also gonna grab my little back feet that I have here, and one at a time, I'm gonna thread the tail that we left on them onto my embroidery needle. And then I'm gonna sew these on. Make sure they're facing the front of the body. And I'm just gonna sew them on right below the hip at the bottom of the body. And then you just want to repeat the same thing again with the other foot on the other side. And you can also just go ahead and tie off this yarn and weave it into the body. And then this step is optional, but if you want your arms to kind of sit together like this with the hands together, you can just take a scrap piece of your yarn and tie some yarn between both of them. So I'm just gonna kind of hold them together where I want them, and then just make a stitch through both of my arms to secure that, and then just tie them together, tie the yarn together. And then you can just tuck these little ends in. I don't know, I just prefer how that looks with the arms together. I think it's really cute. And then the last step for our body is to attach the tail. So I'm just looking at the back of my body here, and I'm gonna grab my tail and thread this tail onto my embroidery needle. And again, you should have that tail from your magic ring on the outside. And to sew this on, I'm just gonna stick it on the back of the body where I want it to sit, and then sew all the way around the outside. Just grabbing a stitch from the tail and then a stitch from the body. And I'm gonna do that all the way around to attach this tail. And then once I've sewn all the way around, I'm just gonna go ahead and tie off this yarn and weave in the ends. Okay, and then I guess you could leave the tail like this if you wanted to, but I'm gonna try to make mine curve upwards a little bit so that from the side it has some curve to it. So to do that, I'm gonna take this tail from my magic ring and thread that onto my embroidery needle. And then on the top of the tail here, I'm just gonna weave my needle in and out through every other row of the tail, going a little bit further than halfway down. And we can always do it more if needed. And then when I pull that tight, it's gonna kind of curve that tail up a little bit. So I'm gonna go down just a couple more rows, weave this in and out of a couple more rows, closer to the base of the tail. And then again, you can see when I pull this tight, it's just gonna curve that tail up. And then once you're happy with how that looks, you can just tie off the yarn and weave it into the body or the tail. Okay, so that's all for our body. I just wanted to finish that really quick before we get started on the head so that you guys have a better picture of what we're looking at here and what we're working with. So for the head, like I mentioned, it's going to be really important to keep your stitch marker nice and centered at the back of the body. For this next round, we're going to do 12 increase stitches. And then for this next round, we're going to do 3 single crochet and an increase stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that 5 more times. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 6 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 1 single crochet and an increase stitch 2 times. So 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to repeat that 1 more time. And then I'm going to make 4 single crochet. And then 2 increase stitches. And then another 4 single crochet. And then I'm going to make an increase stitch and a single crochet 2 times. So I'm going to start with an increase stitch. And then 1 single crochet. And then I'm going to do that 1 more time. And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. For the next round, again, I'm just going to start with 6 single crochet. And then I'm going to do 2 single crochet and an increase stitch 2 times. So 1 and 2 single crochet and then an increase stitch, and then I'm going to do that 1 more time, and then I'm going to do 5 single crochet, and then in these next 2 stitches I'm going to do 3 single crochet in 1. So I'm going to do 3 single crochet in 1 stitch in the next 2 stitches. So 1 single crochet and then going back into that same stitch again, there's 2, and then 1 more time into that same stitch, there's 3 single crochet, and then I'm going to do that 1 more time in the next stitch. So 1, and then back into that same stitch, 2, and 1 more time, 3. And then I'm going to do another 5 single crochet. And then I'm going to do 1 increase stitch and 2 single crochet 2 times. So I'm going to do an increase stitch, and then 2 single crochet, and then I'm going to do that 1 more time, and then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. For this next round, I'm going to go ahead and do 44 single crochet around, and I'm going to do this round off camera for time's sake, but again, you want to do 44 single crochet around, and then I'll be right back to show you what to do next. So I just finished my 44 single crochet around, and for the next round, we're going to start decreasing a little bit. So I'm going to start with 6 single crochet. And then I'm going to do 2 single crochet and a decrease stitch 2 times. So 1 and 2 single crochet and then a decrease. And then I'm going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to do 5 single crochet. And then I'm going to single crochet 3 together. So this looks like a decrease, but instead of with 2 stitches, you do it with 3. So I'm going to go into the front loops of my next 3 stitches. And then just do a normal decrease. So yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And then finish off your stitch like normal. So we're going to do that one more time. So single crochet 3 together, just going under the front loops of all 3 of my next 3 stitches, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, and then finish your stitch like normal. And then I'm going to do 5 single crochet, and then I'm going to do 1 decrease stitch and 2 single crochet 2 times. So 1 decrease stitch, and then 2 single crochet, and then I'm going to do that one more time, and then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. For the next round, again, I'm going to start by making 6 single crochet. And then I'm going to do 1 single crochet and a decrease stitch 2 times. So 1 single crochet and a decrease stitch. And then I'm going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to make 4 single crochet. Two decrease stitches. Another 4 single crochet. And then a decrease stitch and 1 single crochet 2 times. So a decrease stitch and then 1 single crochet, and then I'm going to do that one more time, and then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. And then for the next 2 rounds, I'm just going to do 2 rounds of 30 single crochet around. So I'm going to go ahead and do these rounds off camera, but again, it's 2 rounds of 30 single crochet around, and then I'll be back to show you what to do next. So I just finished my 2 rounds of 30 single crochet around, and for this next round, we're going to be crocheting the ears into the head as we crochet the round. So this is another time when it's really important that your stitch marker is nice and centered at the back of the head. So I'm just going to shift mine over just about 1 stitch. That looks about right to me. And then for this next round, I'm going to start by making 5 single crochet. And I'm going to grab my first ear. And if you remember, the part where this tail is here, this is the bottom of the ear. So what you want to do is find the 5 single crochet that are centered at the bottom of the ear. So these look about right to me. And I'm going to line up these 5 single crochet with the next 5 stitches on my ear. But when I do this, I'm going to have my ear flipped over. So I'm looking at the tail from my slip knot on my ear. And I'm going to line up those 5 stitches across the bottom of the ear with the next 5 stitches on my head. And then I'm going to make 5 single crochet through both pieces. And then I'm just going to make 10 single crochet. And then I'm going to grab my other ear and attach it the exact same way. So I'm just looking at the bottom of my ear here, and I'm going to find these 5 stitches that are centered across the bottom. And I'm going to flip my ear over and then line up those 5 stitches with the next 5 stitches on my head. And then I'm going to make 5 single crochet through both the ear and the head. And then to finish off the round, I'm just going to make 5 more single crochet. And then we'll come back and fix the ears later, so don't worry about how they're laying down and how you're looking at the back of them. For the next round, I'm going to do 3 single crochet and then a decrease stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1, 2, and 3 single crochet, and then a decrease stitch, and then I'm going to do that 5 more times. For the next round, I'm going to do 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1 and 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch. And then I'm just going to do that 5 more times. Okay, and then now's a good time to go ahead and add some stuffing into the head. I do like to add stuffing before I add my safety eyes because I think it's a little bit easier to see where they're gonna land, but feel free to add your eyes first if you prefer that. Just make sure to stuff the little nose out pretty good here. For the eyes, I'm just going to be using 20mm safety eyes. So I'm going to place my eyes in between rounds 13 and 14. And I want them to be about 7 stitches apart. So this looks right. And don't worry if they look far apart, we're going to bring them in a little bit. But once you're happy with the placement of the eyes, you can go ahead and pop the backings on them. And then we're gonna go ahead and finish up our head, and then we'll come back to these eyes as well. For the next round, I'm gonna do 1 single crochet and a decrease stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then a decrease stitch, and then I'm going to do that 5 more times. And then for the last round of the head, I'm just going to do 6 decrease stitches. And then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn. I'm going to go ahead and tuck just a tiny bit more stuffing in the top of the head here to round it out. Alright, and then once you're happy with how your head is stuffed, we can go ahead and close up this gap. So I'm just going to thread this little tail that I have left onto my embroidery needle. And then I'm going to weave this in and out of all of the 6 stitches that I have left at the top of the head. And then once you've gone through all 6 stitches, you can just pull that tight to close the gap. And then I'm just going to weave the extra tail into the head. First, let's go ahead and get these ears out of the way. So to fix the ears, as I mentioned before, you should have a little bit of a tail left from your slip knot on the back of the ear. So I'm just going to take that tail and thread it onto my embroidery needle. And then I'm just going to bring the ear up about 1 stitch. You don't want to go too far up, but just grab a stitch from under the head that's kind of about where that part of the tail from the slip knot would land, like that. And then when you pull that tight, it's going to help hold that ear so it's sticking up straight. And then once you're happy with how that looks, you can go ahead and just tie off your yarn and then weave that extra tail into the head, and just make sure to do this on the other ear as well. The last couple of details that we have left is just shaping the face. So to do that, I'm just going to take a scrap piece of my brown yarn and thread that onto my embroidery needle. And the first thing we're going to do is bring those eyes together as promised. So I'm just going to insert my yarn at the top inside corner of this eye and bring it over to the top inside corner of the other eye. And then pull that through, but make sure to leave a little bit of yarn over here. And then I'm just going to come down to the bottom inside corner of the same eye, over to the bottom inside corner of my other eye, and pull that through. And then I'm just going to tie these 2 ends together. And the tighter you tie them, the closer it's going to bring the eyes together, so tie it as loose or as tight as you'd like. And then once you're happy with how it looks, you can go ahead and just tie those ends together and weave them into the head. And then then next we're gonna add a couple of little white details to the outside of the eye. I'm just gonna grab 2 little scrap pieces of my white yarn, and I'm just gonna thread one onto my embroidery needle. And I'm gonna insert this at the top inside corner of my eye and have it kind of come out to the side. Pull it through and then pull it off my needle. And I'm gonna rethread the needle onto the other end of the yarn. This just gives me a little bit more control with where I place the white on the eye. And then I'm gonna insert this at the bottom center of my eye and have it come out at that same spot on the back of the head. And then once you kind of pull these 2 ends nice and tight, it's just going to create that little white detail around the outside of the eye. And then I'm just going to tie these 2 ends together and tuck them into the head. And don't forget to repeat this on both eyes. 2 more things left to do. First, we're going to do some shaping to the nose, and then we're going to embroider the nose onto the face. So I'm just going to take another scrap piece of my brown yarn and thread that onto my embroidery needle. And then I'm going to insert this. I'm going to like push the head back and get as far down underneath here as I can into the chin. And I'm going to insert my yarn into the chin and then have it come out right at that like kind of bottom inside corner of the eye. Pull that through, but make sure to leave a tail down here at the bottom. And then I'm going to come over and insert it in the same place on the other eye. So just kind of in that bottom inside corner, and have it come out back down at the chin. And then when I pull these 2 tight, they should line up nicely right there where I want my nose to be. So I'm going to tie the ends together, and that's going to create that nose shaping that we're looking for. And then once you're happy with how it looks, tie the ends together again and just weave them into the head. Okay, and then our very last step is to embroider the nose. So I just have some medium weight black yarn that I'm going to thread onto my embroidery needle. And I'm just going to insert this on the side of this little nose that we've created here, and have it go over to the other side of my nose. And then I'm just going to pull this through, leave a little tail over here on this end, and I'm going to loop this yarn around the nose a few times until I'm happy with how it looks. And then once you're happy with how that looks, I'm going to insert my needle right in the center of that nose and have it come down just a few rows. And that might kind of shift your nose out of the way a little bit, but that's okay. And then I'm going to go back up to that center point and back over to where we first inserted our yarn. And then once you're happy with how everything looks, you can go ahead and just tie these 2 ends together and weave them into the head. You could also embroider some little eyebrows on him if you wanted to. I think that'd be adorable. If you do end up making this pattern, I would absolutely love to see your photos, and you can tag me on Instagram at Crochet with Kira. I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope to see you again soon in the next one.